Well, hello everyone and welcome to another hydroponic themed growing video. What I wanted to feature here was some of the difficulties that I've had with growing plants from seed in rock wool cubes, which is what I would typically have done with a tower garden. Over the years, I've just found it becoming increasingly difficult to grow in the rock wool cubes because there's just a lot of things that seem to go wrong with it. Like, if you look at these here, just to exemplify a little bit, there's always little residues and mineral buildups and algae buildup that always happens in the rock wool cubes. And it doesn't seem to matter ultimately how I try to do this, whether I'm using them in opaque containers or clear containers, whether it's underwatering, overwatering, whether I'm using pH adjusted water or tap water. I've honestly played around with this a lot, and it's just a lot of hit and miss. And I don't know if anyone else out there runs into these issues when going from seeds. Of course, the seeds can also be an issue unto itself, but in general, and after all my researching online, it also seems that rock wool is it's not a preferential substance to grow. It can work, but like I said, it's a lot of hit or miss, and honestly, I've just grown tired of wasting a lot of seeds and germination cycles to try to get good propagation out of seeds so I can have a timely growing and timely harvests and, be self-sustaining and not having to go out and buy leafy greens and other vegetables if I could grow them on a consistent basis. So for me, germinating seeds is a really important part of the deal. So I was inspired by Kevin from epicgardening.com, who created his own little hydroponic build for germinating and even for transplanting already grown seeds. And the really cool thing about this is you can build it yourself from relatively accessible materials. You can buy grow units that are already made for you, obviously, the upwards of $100, anywhere from $200 or more even. But you can also build your own and customize it to your liking. So what I'm going to show you is just a build that I made following Kevin's example. And then you can pretty much tweak this to adjust your needs however you like. Okay, so what I chose to use was a roughneck bin. These are the miniature size. They're, I think, about 15-liter marker and whatnot. You can find these at any hardware store typically, or places like Walmart. Thing to note is this is recycling number 4. So this is a soft version of what normally you see the number 5 on the recycling bin, which 4 and 5 are considered probably to be among the safest to use in terms of any possible contamination onto foods and that kind of stuff. So the 4 is a soft version, the number 5 is the hard version of the same kind of plastic. I did initially try this with the harder plastic, but drilling holes in that proved to be quite messy and difficult, so I ended up opting for this. And the height is also going to be important, so this is roughly about 7 or 8 inches, and we don't want more than that because of the way that we're going to be keeping our growing medium moist. So basically, pretty simple. I am only using this for germination, not for actually growing long term, so I opted for maximizing yield. Therefore, I drilled as many holes as I could possibly fit onto this. If you wanted to actually grow in here for a longer term, for maybe having continuous harvest of herbs and things like that, then you would want to space it a little bit more and use less holes. So this is designed to house 2-inch net pots, which are pretty standard. And what's also pretty standard are 2-inch hole saws. So these ones can be a little costly, so you do want to shop around. They got these at Home Hardware here in Canada, and you can find these sometimes with just a saw, but you do need a pilot drill, so that is sometimes sold as a separate accessory, and then that's where it can get expensive. So I did manage to get this pretty cheap. Now this did not work well at all with hard plastics, but with soft plastic it works fairly amazingly. So all I did was use something that was the same diameter of the saw, which is 2 inches. This is just a cover of a cream container, and I pretty much initially, the first one I actually measured out so that I could get even spacing everywhere, but I realized that because of the shape of the lid and the indent here, I was actually able to eyeball this pretty well. So I took a pen, just did a little mark to indent around the circumference of the lid, and I did this for the total of the 15 holes. Once the marking is made, from there all I need to do is get a drill, plop this in, and then eyeball as best as you can to center this with the marking that you made, and then at high speed drill carefully through so that you puncture it through to the other side. Do this for all the holes, and then when you're done, just give it a nice little bit of cleaning. You don't need to go as far as using sandpaper. I just kind of picked it with my fingers to get any of the loose plastic fibers, and now it's pretty nice and clean. Once that's done, you also want to make sure that you have a hole on the side somewhere on the bin, but above what is going to be our water line, because this is where we'll feed out our air line that is going to be plugged into this gadget. This is an air stone, and there's different designs for these with different models and makes. I opted for this round one so I could get a somewhat even distribution of air bubbles flowing up. So the way that this works is by positioning this in the center and filling our water line up to just underneath where the net pots will sit. This is going to fizz up the bubbles. This action will essentially keep our medium on the net pots consistently moist, but not over drenched, because the net pots won't actually be sitting in the water. It's going to be the bubbling action as they pop that's kind of constantly maintain moisture for the growing medium. So yes, you could still do this with rock wool cubes and probably have better luck than having the rock wools in a tray with constant water sitting in there, because then they just become too saturated. This way, you have the aeration and just the necessary amount of water to keep things moist. So this is the basic build. You will probably want to harness the air stone down with some suction plugs like this so that it doesn't just kind of float around. And then you're also going to need to buy a pump. Now these pumps, you can get any aquarium store, pet store. There's different models and designs. You just want to make sure that you get one that's powerful enough for the amount of liters of water that you're going to be housing in your containers. Now I decided to kind of hit two birds with one stone, and I cut the air line to give just initial feeding from the pump, and then I use a little splitter so that I can have one air line flowing into one bin and then double the output by having another air line feeding into my second bin. This way I can have up to 30 plants germinating at the same time in a most efficient manner. Okay guys, this is an addendum in the video because I was finding that the round air stone just wasn't giving me the kind of aeration that I wanted, because my lids on these roughneck bins happen to be that there's a little bit of an inset on the middle, which makes the inner net pots actually sit a little lower. And because of that, it means that they would get more saturated than the ones on the outer rim. So rather than opting for one of these round air stones that focused most of the aeration on the center of the bin here, instead I opted for this style right here, which is a long rod. And then all I did, as you can see, is just attach the air tube here to the end. It's pretty easy to do. And then I can position this diagonally in my bin here. And then after playing around here with the positioning, I make sure that this is lying down flat on the bottom. And it's already attached to my pump here. So all I'm going to do is plug this in, and you'll see what the action looks like. So you can see there's actually quite a fair bit of bubbling that's happening, as opposed to before. I only had a little bit here in the center, and I also use a more powerful pump because of the fact that I am doing not one but two bins. So as you can see, I got both bins now bubbling, and I do have to make sure that I leave the air pump positioned at least at the height of the water level. This is just to prevent any possibility of, should there be a power failure, of water seeping back in through the air line and into the pump, which would cause some damage. So it's just a matter of elevating it up a little bit with something. And you will notice that the pump like this does have a little bit of vibration to it that makes some noise. So you're going to want to have this on a padded surface of some kind. Like I have a rubber padding underneath here, just to kind of absorb a little bit of that shock value. And if you're not sleeping in the room, it's not a big deal. Where the water level needs to be on your container or something else that you may want to put a label on, because that way over time that some of the water is going to evaporate, and you want to make sure that when you fill this back up, it's easy for you to do so if you have a marker That way you don't have to do any guesswork, and you'll make sure that each time that you need to do a fill up, that you're gonna have it at the right level in order to get that splashing water onto your growing medium. Okay guys, so just some closing notes here on the preparation of the water. You do want to make sure that you know how much is going into your container, because that's going to help you measure out how much you'll need in nutrient solution at a later point. And the other thing that you want to pay attention to is that pH adjustment of the water. While some people say that's not really necessary to do, just to be on the safe side, I always like to take that precaution, and I pH adjust the water to 6.0, so that's that average, just slightly on subacidic side. And also I use my own distilled water. I have a machine at home to distill water. I think it's nice to give the plants a clean start as opposed to tap water that's full of all sorts of filth and chemicals. So if that's an option for you, awesome. Reverse osmosis might be another option, or even just bottled distilled water might be better than tap water. But again, people argue that it doesn't really matter, so you can play with that as you like. So some other things to note is that the air lines should definitely be black and opaque, as well as the containers themselves should also be opaque. And if they're not, if they're clear, then an alternative you can do is spray paint them down with a clear white color. And the reason for this is that we're going to avoid light entering into any parts of the container as much as possible to minimize any possibility of algae growth. Now, it really shouldn't be an issue anyways, because when things are going to be germinating, they're not going to be in here that long that it's going to yield any sort of potential long-term problem with algae or anything like that. But by having everything opaque, you're going to preemptively troubleshoot any potential issue that you might have on that front. Also, all these materials, I pretty much got them at local hardware stores, but all this stuff is available online, such as on Amazon, if you do need to order, whether it be growing mediums, whether it be the plugs, the containers, some kind of pumps, or air stones and wire and all that. So it's all accessible for you if you don't have hydroponic stores or well-equipped hardware stores close to where you live. Now I want to bring your attention to this here. Now this is a 2-foot long T5 light, 6400K HO spectrum, made by Sunblaster, probably one of the more common brands that's out there, on a T5 universal stand, also by Sunblaster. And the reason this is here is obvious, because the rooting plants or the seedlings are going to be needing light in order to grow abundantly, not grow long necks trying to find the light or the sun source. So it's important that you have one of these set up as well, or any other kind of light ballast that you can set up if you're hanging it from the ceiling or whatever your case may be for your particular setup. Another element that's really important is aeration in the room. So I bring your attention to the corner here. I have one of these rotating fans in the corner of this room here, and when it's on, which is all the time except right now because I'm recording, it actually rotates. So, and it's also doing in front of the window that I keep a little bit open. This way there's always fresh air coming into the room, and it's going to be sucked in by the fan and then pushed and distributed throughout the entire room. And leaving the door open in the room as well ensures that there's adequate circulation. This is really important because this is one key way to prevent a lot of fungal or algae growth that can start up regardless whether you're growing things in soil or hydroponically. Okay guys, so once your setup is built, the next thing is to choose a growing medium for growing your seeds. I'm going to be trying to use these rapid rooters, which are made of peat-moss, and I'm going to see how well these perform as opposed to my previous attempts with rock wool. And these bags of 50 are available to purchase online as well as local hydroponic stores. And they come in a Ziploc bag like this. So what I've done is I went ahead and I filled the Tupperware container with pH adjusted water to about 6.0. And what I want to do is reconstitute slightly the growing medium in the water. So I just get these thoroughly wet, it doesn't take very long, and then I shake it off slightly, and I'm going to put them in another container that's without any water, because I want these to not be like completely crazy saturated. I just want them to regain an appropriate amount of moisture for the seeds to activate. So if you're using these rapid rooters, after you have them soaked and you give them a little bit of a shake, you do want to be careful that you don't want to like squeeze these things really hard, because that would destroy its internal matrix. That's going to give it with maximum amount of aeration and solubility for water. So we want to make sure we keep that intact, and you want to just handle these as gently as you can. And there we go, I have my whole lot of ready to go, and the next step is going to be to put in seeds into each one. So here I've got my trusty package of seeds, both the stuff I've bought as well as things that I've harvested over the last 2 years. And so really all we're going to do is just take out a couple of seeds. Depending on what you're putting in, you're going to want to switch up the amount of seeds that you're putting in, because I like to ensure that I get at least something to successfully germinate 100%. And if I put in just one seed, then I might not guarantee that. So I'm going to put in 3 seeds of this chard into the plugs, and just by dropping them into the holes. That's pretty much it. Coming back over to the setup, and I'm just going to put it in one of the slots in the net pots. And that's it. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to pour just a little bit of water over the hole, just to make sure that the seeds get completely wet. So this is very much the same as I would do if it was the rock wool cubes. Also, as I always like to do, I print out a sheet with enough squares basically to outline the layout of whatever it is that I'm growing seeds in, so that I know what's what. And so, since what I just planted in this corner here was pink chard, I'm going to label it pink chard. And I'll do this for all the other stuff that I'm going to germinate. Okay guys, here we go. I've placed all my plugs on all the slots that I wanted to occupy. And I just want to show you, if I can here, so you see what the inside effect looks like. I'm going to lift this guy out. And on the odd chance that you can see through there, the bubbling action from the air stone is ensuring that the bottom of the plug is always moistened without the whole plug being submerged in the water. Now, because these things are being done from seed, they don't need any nutrients right now in the water. But one of the cool things about this setup is that you could actually take an already existing seedling, or even if you break off a piece of an herb like basil, let's say, you can root that into a growing medium and stick that into here, and that will give you a head start on your growing. But if you're growing anything that came from soil, you're going to have to be very careful to clean up as much of the soil on the roots, and without damaging the roots as much as possible, so that you can transplant them onto here and mitigate any likelihood of contamination from bacteria or other things from the soil. So this is one thing. Another optional accessory is this. You guys are probably familiar with this as the Tower Garden timer. I really like this manual timer. It allows me to control each individual time slot with the manual tug. And I'm using this for controlling 2 things. One is the light, and the other, you can't see it, but I actually have a heating mat underneath here. And that way, if I find that the water gets too cold because of the ambient temperature in the room, I can have this going on for half a day, as well as the lights for a 12-hour period when these things are ready to photosynthesize, meaning they've already sprouted their first 2 leaves, and you're going to be wanting the lighting cycle to start with. Up to 12 hours is pretty good. And having this on a timer just simply saves you the hassle of having to always turn the light on and off manually. Now, if you wanted to use this setup for growing hydroponically, even just in a bin like this, with less net pots in your setup, then when you add in your nutrient solution, you can use the General Hydroponics Flora Grow, because the nutrient ratio of this is going to keep your seedlings in a vegetative state, meaning that you can consistently harvest things like herbs. So that's another thing to consider. I've also mentioned a couple times about using pH adjusted water. So at any hydroponic store you can pick up one of these pH test kits, which is really simple to use. The little vial in here is just simply put in with whatever water in your reservoir is. 1 drop of this, and the color that you get is going to tell you the pH of your water. And this is a really easy, quick way to get sample of the pH. And in addition to this, ideally you want to have some kind of storage with already pH adjusted water, and if applicable, some nutrient solution as well, so that when it comes time to top up the bins, then you already have the water ready to go, and you don't have to do the pH adjusting and the addition of nutrients, if applicable, every single time you want to do it. So it's a nice little prep trick to have on hand. So just remember that you want to, every once in a while, keep an eye on the water level. You want to make sure, ideally, you probably want to mark the spot where you fill up with water so that you can easily take a look when you lift on the inside. But it's also just as easy, really, to look at one of the net pots and you can see where the water level is at that way, if you have any that are open. So there you go, guys. This has been my tutorial for a custom built hydroponic growing setup for hatching seedlings and or cutlings from any herb or plant that you can propagate from. If you have any questions about any of the stuff that I covered, please feel free to leave comments below and I'll do my best to answer them for you. Thanks, guys.